Good morning. Today we are continuing with Unit 11. We are working on CO70. I can use a tree diagram to find the number of possible outcomes. So in order to use a tree diagram, we need to know what that is. A tree diagram is a branching diagram that shows all the possible outcomes of a process carried out in several stages. So let's look at what it means to make a tree diagram. Let's say that we are ordering a fruit smoothie. You can choose a small, medium, or large in one of the following flavors: strawberry, banana, or orange. How many different choices of smoothies do you have? Make a tree diagram to list all the possible choices of smoothies. So, if I order a small fruit smoothie, what are my fruit choices? Nick?
You have, don't you have strawberry, banana, and orange?
Yep. So from my small, I have strawberry, banana, and orange. Now, if I order a medium, what are my fruit choices? Zoe? Strawberry, banana, and orange. Now I'm going to order a large. What are my fruit choices, Landon? Then it says your outcome. So my outcome would be a small strawberry, small banana, small orange, medium strawberry, medium banana, medium orange, and then large strawberry, large banana, and large orange. How many outcomes do I have? That's my question. How many would there be, Brielle? 9, because I'm going to count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So how many different choices of smoothies do you have? You have 9 choices. So to do a tree diagram, you actually have to write it all out. So Peyton, you have nothing written out on your paper. What do you think you should do?
You should write it all out.
What I put on the board is what you should be putting on your binder. It's been this way all year. What I'm putting on the board is important for you to know. This is how you make a tree diagram. I am not up here just talking for the fun of it, friends. This is for your benefit. When I write something on the board, you write it on your binder sheet. It's going to be the same way next year with Mr. Schultz. You will have binder sheets. When he writes something on the board, you write it on your binder sheet. It's not goofy time. Do we understand how the tree diagram works? You have to show all of the work, otherwise it is not a tree diagram. If you just look at it and you try to do the math in your head, that's mental math. That is not a tree diagram. To do a tree diagram, you have to write them out. Let's look at our next part. Using a tree diagram. Find the probability. Find the probability of getting at least 2 heads when tossing the coin 3 times. So you're tossing the coin 3 times. It's going to land on the heads or the tails of the coin. Make a tree diagram to list the outcomes of the experiment. Circle the successful outcomes. What does it mean to be a successful outcome? What do we need to have happen? Zoe? The outcomes where it lands on heads at least twice. Okay, so that's our successful outcomes. So we need to list all of our outcomes. So then we're going to go and count which ones were successful. Which ones did it land on heads at least 2 times? So we're going to have first, second, and third because we have 3 coin tosses. What are my options for the first toss of the coin? What are my possible options? Mia, heads or tails? So if I tossed my coin and it landed on heads the first time, what are my options for my second time? Anthony? Heads or tails? What would be my options for the third toss? So look at how I'm breaking it up here. I have heads, and then my second toss could be heads or tails. So if I landed on heads and I landed on heads, then I could land on heads or tails. If I landed on heads, then I landed on tails, I could land on heads or tails. See how we did that? So now what am I going to do if I landed on tails first? Nick?
You do heads or tails.
My second choice could be heads or tails. What about my third toss? Gregory?
Heads or tails.
So I have to look at, if I had tails then heads, my third could be heads or tails. But if I had tails and then tails, my third could be heads or tails. So now I want to look at all of my outcomes. So if I did heads, 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 that's one outcome. Then I have, for my first toss is a head, second toss is a head, third toss is a tails. That's another possible outcome. Then I have heads, tails, heads. Then I have heads, tails, tails. So we're just following them down, going like that. So you're following all of your outcomes. So what is my first outcome if I flipped tails first? Will W?
Tails, heads, and heads.
Tails, heads, heads. So I'm just following it down. What's the next outcome I could have, Ryan T?
Tails, heads,
Tails, heads, tails. Then what's my next outcome? Gregory?
tails, tails, tails.
Oh,
Heads.
tails, tails, heads. And my last one is tails, tails, tails. So now my successful outcomes are how many had at least 2 heads in the outcome. So I'm going to look at it and say, this first outcome had 3 heads. At least 2. My next one had 2 heads and a tail. That's at least 2. Then I have heads, tails, heads. There's at least 2. Heads, tails, tails. Is there at least 2 heads in that outcome? No, so I can't count that one. So then I have tails, heads, heads. There are 2 heads in there. Tails, head, tail. Nope, there's just 1. tails, tails, heads, nope, there's just one, and tails, 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 or I didn't land on heads at all, so that would not be successful. So, remember with our probability yesterday, successful outcomes goes over what?
Number of times.
Number of times. So successful outcomes over total outcomes. That's what we talked about yesterday, successful over total. So what would my fraction look like? Zoe?
It would be 4.
Yeah, we had 4 successful outcomes. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 8 total outcomes, which equals 4/8 equals 1/2. 1/2 is 0.5. 0.5 is 50%. You guys see how we did that? So we're using that tree diagram to find our probability that we were working on yesterday. So use that tree diagram to break it down, and then we're going to use that successful out of the total. So let's look at what we're going to do for our workbook page today. We are on page 171. So on page 171, it says make a tree diagram using these 2 spinners. So you're going to make that tree diagram. Each spinner is divided into equal parts. So number 1, you would spin this spinner B 2 times. What are your choices? So you want to spin 1, you want to spin 2. What would the outcomes be? If the first time you spun it, you spun a 7. The second time you spun it, you spun a 7. Or the first time you spun it, you spun a 7. And then the second time you spun a 3. So you're going to want to do it just like that, heads and tails. What are your options when you spin it the first time? What are the options when you spin it that second time? We've got some word problems here, so you're going to have to figure out, using those words, that's going to be your choices, just like with the fruit smoothie. Small, medium, large, strawberry, banana, orange. So you're going to break it down the same way we broke it down with that fruit smoothie. How many outcomes do you get? You're going to need to look at what the probability is, your successful outcomes. It's going to tell you what it wants. So a bag, what's the probability? It's going to have a scramble book. You're going to have to look to see at your final outcomes how many had scramble listed in it. And then do your successful over total. Any questions? Okay, so for my friends at home, we hope you are well, and we hope to see you soon.